Welcome to the Co-Authoring Chronicles podcast, 2 voices, 1 tale.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to our podcast. I'm Helen Corvis, and I am imperturbable.
Imperturbable. What?
Today's
What's this
episode,
vocabulary?
yes, exactly. Today's episode is about the oh so exciting topic of expanding your vocabulary. And that's how I thought I'd launch today, with the number one way that I grew my vocabulary when I was a smaller Helen. And I'm not going to tell you just yet, but imperturbable.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. So I think I'd like to start with maybe a few motivational quotes from you, but also the why. When we write, different words, they make our work interesting. Nobody necessarily suffers by having a story spiced up by words that are maybe descriptive, florid, new at times. I think it's a good thing to do for your writing, and sometimes you find beautiful words that just let you really express yourself.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I guess the obvious question for me, Helen, is how do you physically do it? Like, what is your process to vocabulary?
Very good. Okay. So my process for vocabularying is this. Sometime in my extremely early 20s, what I did is I subscribed to Merriam-Webster's Word of the Day email. And I know email's a little passé these days, but back at the time, it was very exciting. And I know it sounds like it's very incremental, right? Every day I would get a new word, and my goal was to use that word in a sentence. And because I was very cheeky, I was determined to be unhelpful about how I used the word. But this is the way I learned words like defenestrate. Do you know that one, Steaphan?
No.
Well, it means
Please.
yeah,
Oh,
it means to try to kill someone by throwing them out a window.
really? There's a whole word for that?
There's a whole word for that. And I think if I look it up even more further, it's there's an alternate definition which I didn't know about, and that is outside of throwing a person, or apparently you could throw a thing out of a window, which really makes it exciting. It's also another way to say that it's a very quick dismissal from a political party or an office. So
Mm.
you can defenestrate political leaders. See how
I
exciting?
would like to throw some of them out windows, though. So,
See, that's how words just got very exciting in our sentences right now.
hmm.
So every day I would get a new word from Merriam-Webster, and I would try to use it at least once or twice. And in conversation with other people. And believe it or not, it worked. I was part of their word of the day for at least, like, I don't know, like 3 to 5 years. And while I kind of fell out of the habit of using the word of the day, it was one method that really expanded my vocabulary, because the Merriam-Webster word of the day is curated. So it's not as if you're kind of randoing through the dictionary and learning words like al dente or, you know, or wherever your finger may wind up. But for example, today's word of the day from Merriam-Webster is imperturbable,
Mhm.
which means that you're rock solid, cool, you're not going to be disturbed. The imperturbable captain sailed through the violent storm.
I have to say, I think I did know that one.
Hmm.
I often don't recall, though. It's interesting whether I know the definition of a word just because life experience, reading, or I've subconsciously looked at the roots and suffixes and made a logical determination in context, and that's why I think I know a word. But it's interesting how we learn words in often without actually looking them up in the dictionary. So I read mostly on Kindles, e-readers, and one of the very frustrating things to me is I often find myself reading, and when I don't quite glean a word, I will hit the dictionary in Kindle. But here's the downside. while you can adjust the font size for the books that you're reading in Kindle, the dictionary has this microscopic writing. Reading at night without my glasses on, I'm zoomed in incredibly in my book, and then the microscopic writing in the dictionary, I can't actually see the words, which is very frustrating. That would be my normal technique. I learn words through context and just reading a lot. And I do look up words in dictionaries occasionally, but not as diligently as a word a day. Now, you said this was later in your life, so does that mean that there was no spelling bees for you? This was post spelling bee era, or
Yes, this is post spelling bee era. I think
um,
what happened, it was my first corporate job, and I was a little bit bored with my day. And so I did things like subscribe to the word of the day.
there are many worse things you could do, right? For real. And going on to like words, why are words important for writers, right? I have, some of my favorite quotes actually, and they're very, very common ones. So I apologize if I'm wearing these out, but, like Mark Twain said, the difference between the right word and the almost right word is the difference between lightning and a lightning bug. I really like that one,
That is
because
a good one. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I mean, when we're writing, I know it's like there's emotions and feelings and pictures, I think sometimes behind the words that we use. And if you use the wrong word, you may, even though technically it's the right word, the picture that you paint may not really convey what it was in your mind as a writer. You choose the wrong one. I don't know. That makes sense, Helen?
Absolutely. I mean, that's the interesting and frustrating thing, especially about English, right?
Mhm.
We draw words from all kinds of different places, and each word has a connotation in addition to a denotation. And I think as writers, and here's the thing, I don't want to be like gatekeeping through like academia, right? I think gatekeeping is a sucky thing to do. You don't have to have a huge vocabulary to be a writer, but words, if you are a writer, it's fun to learn, in my opinion, new words to better express yourself. And so like for example, right? I just said denotation. Technically not a word, but I love it because it rhymes with connotation. But the real word is denote, right?
Mhm,
And what it really means is when you denote something is it almost just says this is what the word stands for, like literally.
mhm,
And then we all know the connotation, which is kind of like that more of the subtext or kind of the tone or the feeling or
mhm,
behind the direct word. Um, Anyway, my point is that I'm not gatekeeping here. I don't think people have to be very fancy with their words to write a good story. I think if you look at Faulkner, for example, and some of his works, some of his writing style, like for example, in As I Lay Dying, he has a whole chapter that's made up of one sentence that says, "My mother is a fish." Okay.
mhm,
And Faulkner is a famous example of American literature. So I'm definitely not saying you need all the fancy words, but it is
mhm,
so nice when you have them. Um, because my other example of a word that it's kind of fun to know is bandersnatch. I also learned bandersnatch through the word of the day. And do you know what
mhm.
that is?
No, I don't, but I hope it's not R-rated.
It's not R-rated. No. The actual definition is a wildly grotesque or bizarre individual, right? So I'm thinking you're writing and you could say, "Oh my god, I saw a wild bandersnatch."
Mhm. Wow.
I mean, it's a fun word. It doesn't actually that sentence wasn't helpful,
Mhm.
but go ahead. You were gonna say something.
Well, the question I have there, this is something that's always struck me, and I know we've um, mentioned tips from folks like Jim Thayer,
Here, yeah.
yeah, and so I wonder what your thoughts are on this. I have mixed feelings. So using words that 90% of people have to look up to understand what they mean. And I feel as an author, it's obviously your writing, your call. I think that you can use these words that 90% of people will not understand, but place it very strategically so that not just arbitrarily, I guess, but in a key part or a key point, or especially maybe if you're doing a quote of, someone's dialogue and you use one of these words, like if you had a character say Bandersnatch, would
Yes.
be way more powerful than just, arbitrarily throwing it in your writing somewhere.
Absolutely. I 100% support this. I almost think of using some of these words like world building in a way, or as you just kind of mentioned, as a powerful tool for character building. Like one interesting thing about Bandersnatch, it's actually a Lewis Carroll word. It's made up from Alice in Wonderland, and how he wrote it. In his book, the Bandersnatch was like this. It's the crazy. I'm not sure if they ever see it. Invisible monster that chases them through the woods, and I think can only be killed with a vorpal blade that goes snicker snack. Right. That's
Hmm.
it's a wild sense just in the Lewis Carroll sense of things, but I agree with you, and I would say, yeah, I think the words you choose can have a lot to do with world building as well, and should probably be treated the same way in a sense as when you make up words as part of world building.
Yeah. Yeah. And I suppose too, some authors may have it as their brand of having college level writing,
Mhm.
that there are readers that want to read that college level. From what I've gleaned from other authors and tips from writing courses and things like that, is for the majority though, use vocabulary that's understandable by your target audience. And if from a marketing perspective, your target audience is generally like in the 5th, 6th through 7th grade reading level. So it depends what your kind of brand and feeling is in your writing.
Mhm.
One thing, and even with the Mark Twain quote, and I'm going to give another one here from Robert Frost. You had mentioned using words in context, the feeling that words portray.
Mhm.
I don't know if that's exactly how you said it. Connotation, I think is what you said. So Robert Frost said the famous quote, "No tears in the writer, no tears in the reader."
Mm.
And that does not infer that they're fancy words necessarily. It just infers that the words that you use have connotations that emote feelings that you're
Mhm.
desiring as a writer.
Yeah.
And so, could be a fancy word, might be a simple word, but that simple word used in the right context can emote feelings.
Yeah. I really like that. So I think this is a really compelling case for just spending a little bit of time to expand your vocabulary, whether it's through reading as an author and maybe taking a moment to intentionally look something up to expand your understanding of the word, whether it's playing games. I was, I actually know somebody. I don't like this method, but I thought I'd recommend it. But of course, I know somebody who's excellent at Scrabble, but my problem when I play Scrabble with them, I keep asking, like, "What does that word mean?" And they're like, "I don't know." They just know it's a real word, and I'm like, it's so
Yeah,
annoying. Other recommended ways are to edit your own work, and I guess that's a way to allow you to engage in the thesaurus, like, within the course of actually improving your own work as well, but I guess we can all find different ways to do it. I'm just such a big fan of Word of the Day because it's how I learned, and to me, it was fun, and I think importantly, it was incremental, right? It wasn't like it was a big deal. Sometimes I think about my friends in school who were studying vocabulary books for the SAT. That really did not look fun. Like, that is absolutely not the way that I want to learn
yeah,
new words, and that's why I'm a big fan of, like, a word of the day kind of thing. You use a word enough and it's yours to keep.
for sure. Yeah. Wanted to touch one last. We can't talk about word use and things like this without mentioning Stephen King and what he wrote in
Mm,
his book on writing, a memoir of the craft. I like one thing that he said too, and this also goes to Stephen King's point that he's made in various places about advising writers to focus on clarity and to avoid overcomplicated language.
mhm.
One famous thing he said is the adverb is not your friend. And then he goes on, I believe the road to hell is paved with adverbs. It is partly on vocabulary, but he's generally saying basically you try to avoid them at
Yeah.
all costs. And right, I don't, and I hate to use the word at all costs because there are times where you need an ly word. Always just use it within reason.
Mhm.
Yeah, we like it.
Mhm.
You might have given me some encouragement to actually do a word a day type thing. I thought about doing it in the past, and you've given me a new lease on that desire to actually learn about. I forgot it. Something the what was it? Baldersnatch? Yeah,
Bandersnatch.
Bandersnatch. Yeah, things like that. I could go around impressing friends and colleagues, family members with. That's just an awesome example. We talked about Shakespeare in the past about the kind of inventing
Yeah.
new language, and that is an example based on your history you gave on that word of
Mhm.
an author just creating a word and making it so famous that it actually hits the dictionary.
Yeah, I mean, there's some good ones. Like I love the Vorpal blade, right? From Lewis Carroll. There's a sci-fi author, Charles Stross. He actually used the Vorpal blade in one of his books. I think it was a Glass House, I think, where he's got the main character is part of um a military unit, and that's what their weapon of choice is, their Vorpal blades, which I thought was really fun.
That make
So
Webster too?
you know, that's a good question. I don't know if
Mm,
Charles Strauss used it as just part of kind of his world building, but
oh,
it was definitely one of the things that was popularized, like, by Lewis Carroll.
okay. Any other points you wanted to touch on?
No.
Well, thank you everyone for listening. Hopefully you've gathered and obtained a new appreciation for vocabulary and how an author can use words. And with that, we'll talk to you soon in the next episode. Bye.